All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second Citizen Science Conference for Biodiversity in India. This conference is hosted as part of the preparatory phase project of the National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Wellbeing. and this preparatory phase project is catalyzed and supported by the Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, the National Biodiversity Authority, and the Biodiversity Collective. This is the second such conference. We had the first national conference last year, hosted by the same group. Last year we had some 500 participants, and this year we have about the same number of registrants. So we look forward to interacting with you, and we hope that you have a good time at the conference. And without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to the other members of the organizing committee of this conference to welcome you, and then we'll get started. So can I invite Farida Tampal to say a few words?
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back again for the second annual Citizen Science Conference. And we have an interesting lineup of talks and posters. I'm sure all of you have taken a look at it already. And this year we have some unique participation even from at the communities at the grassroots level. So there are a lot of interesting and very interesting talks and posters. At the same time, we are going to hear directly from the field where people will be talking in their own language. And I think this is what citizen science should be about, where we are very inclusive. We have people who are not even from, need not speak English, can work in a different language. So we are going to have a great time. And I hope that all of you stay here for the next 4 days and attend this conference. And thank you for your participation today. And I will now request Pankaj to take over from here.
Thanks, Farida. I hope I'm audible. Good morning to everybody, and welcome to CITSI 2021. There was a moment when we opened up registrations, we didn't have too many submissions of abstracts. And there was a moment when some of us, and certainly I, thought that maybe we've overstretched ourselves and the critical mass of citizen science and participation is not there. But thankfully, I was proven wrong. And very quickly, we had a very interesting set of submissions and abstracts. So it's really exciting that within 1 year, we have a very interesting diversity of participation that goes on to work on what happened last time, but also stretches the width of what we have in terms of participation. And like Farida mentioned, we have some very interesting keynotes this time, where we have tried to reach out to people actually working in the field and not just listen to each other. So this should be really exciting. And thanks a lot to everybody who has contributed and has joined. And on behalf of the OC, we welcome all of you to this conference. Can I request Prabhakar to say a few words?
Hi, a very warm welcome to the CITSI 2021. It's been fun looking at all the abstracts that have come in and reading them out and then putting them into slots and things like that. It's been fun organizing this. We are on the path of building a community of citizen scientists in the country. The first one was held last year, and this is again reinforcing our attempt at building a community that will take citizen science to a large level. We are at the tip of the iceberg. I think it will grow as we go along. All the best. Have a good time. I'm sure you'll enjoy the conference. Thank you. And may I invite Shannon Olson to give a small introduction and manage the tutorial. Over to you, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. We're so happy that you all could join us. This is my absolute favorite conference I have ever attended in my career, mainly because of the diversity of people that we get to interact with, right? Everything from artists and students to teachers to retirees, right? So pensioners. We have such a diversity of people, and that's really what makes citizen science what it is. And it's really something that this year particularly we want to celebrate, is this idea of diversity and inclusion in citizen science, which is both absolutely imperative to really be able to properly complete citizen science projects, but it also increases the value of them as well. So that's something we really want to celebrate. So we hope you'll very much participate in that. Do introduce yourselves, do participate in all of the chats. So every single session, including this one, will have its own channel, and you can comment right in the channel itself and ask questions to the speakers. And there's also the lounge available if you want to ask other questions. So at this point, what we'd like to do for those of you who are not very familiar with our online platform that we're using called Slack, we have a short video that I previously recorded that gives a little bit of an intro to all of you on all of this issue. So in case there's any confusion for you, we'll play this video now. It's also going to be available to you at any time in the Guide to Slack channel, and you can also view it there in case there's any sort of confusion. And always, 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 if you have any questions at all, any trouble, please use the help channel and somebody will answer you, usually immediately, but maybe as soon as we can get to it if we're all busy and doing other talks at the time. Have fun, enjoy, please participate. That's what makes this conference valuable. We want to hear from you. And so thank you so much. We'll play the video now.
Hi, Prabhakar.
Hi, sir. Hi. Hi. Very nice to see you here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to SITSI India 2021. We are so pleased to have you here at this conference, and we welcome all of you who joined us again from our first conference last year. Thank you so much for coming. We again are having this conference online as we did last year. And so today I'm going to introduce you to the interactive platform we're going to use to be able to speak to each other and communicate, and that's called Slack. So just like last year, the major goal of this conference is to stimulate conversations and interactions about citizen science across India and actually across the world. So we really want you to communicate as much as possible with us, with each other, ask questions to the speakers, ask questions about the posters, and raise issues that are of interest and importance to you. We are very much interested in what you have to say, and my job today is to try to help you make that process as easy as possible. So let's get going. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to first log in through my browser. So I'm sure that many of you have already done this because you obviously are seeing this video through Slack, but in case you received this video externally, I'm going to show you just how to sign in. So I have a Gmail account that I was invited to the channel on, so I'm going to sign in through Google. And once I've signed in, it's going to ask me which of the workspaces I want to enter. I actually use many workspaces, as you can see, but I want to enter this one. SITSI India 2021 is, of course, the channel that we are using today. And here we go. It's opening up. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with it, this is what the Slack platform looks like. And the first thing that I actually want you to do is to try and change your profile. Okay, so here we see on the left, we see where it says SITSI India 2021. And if you go to the upper right-hand corner, you will see, well, I see myself because I have already adjusted my profile, but you may just see an avatar there. And the first thing that you want to do is edit your profile. So if you click on that, you'll get a drop-down menu and it will say edit profile. And you click on that. You can add your name. You can add the kind of name you want to display, maybe just your first name or a nickname. What you do, I'm an associate professor, so I added that. You can add phone numbers, time zone. You can upload a picture of yourself, whatever you want to do. The more information you provide here, the easier it is to have people get to know you and be able to contact you afterwards as well. And once you're ready with all of that information, you can save the changes. Now, the first thing that you probably will go to, if you haven't already navigated to it, is this channel on the left. Now, there's several channels. Slack is organized according to channels, and each one of these channels gives specific information about a particular day or a particular topic. So in the middle here, we see this channel, Guide to Slack. So I'm going to click on that. And it's going to take me inside this channel. And you see that there is already this quick tips on how to interact with Slack. And how to get that is you just double click on it. And then on the browser for me, it will actually open up in a new page. And you'll see we here have a whole number of really, really useful tips to help you interact with Slack. I'll go over some of these also today, but in case you forget what I say in this video, it's here for you. Okay, I'm going to navigate back. I'm going to take you to the very first place that you should go, which is to introduce yourself. So here, down here, you see an introductions channel, and I want you to click on that. And in there, you can introduce yourself. This was a very, very fun channel last year. We had a lot of interactions on it, and it's a really great way of finding out who's at the conference, where they're coming from, what they do, and getting to learn about all the different citizen scientists across this country and across the world. So you can just say hello. So in order to communicate on Slack, you'll see a message bar down at the bottom, and you can just introduce yourself. Hello, my name is Shannon. I am an associate professor at NCBS in Bangalore. And I just enter that. And now I've introduced myself. So after you have done that, the next channel you absolutely should visit first, and you can visit this every single day, is the announcements channel. The announcements channel is a very important channel because every single day, this will be where our coordinators and our organizers will provide important announcements about upcoming sessions, how to find them, where things are happening. And we already see here, we have already an announcement, Introduction to the Conference and Slack Platform. So let's say you see this and you say, oh, that's interesting. I want to check that out. So what you can do is you can click directly on that where, which is actually a link, and it will take you to that channel. Now, this is day one. So here you see, hi, everyone. In this case, it's me as moderating this session. Do post your questions below. Please use the name of the speaker and add to direct questions. And here it gives the talk. And you will be able to live stream the talk through YouTube here. So when you want to watch the talk, it will be happening live. And you can just click on this, and it will play directly in the channel itself. So you can see it's loading here, and it's starting to show. Now, this is the talk that we had from last year by Naveen. Of course, you will see different talks here as they come up. And you want to ask a question to the speaker during the talk. What you can do is you can see here that the coordinator said, please post your questions here. And it says one reply. But let's say you want to ask a particular question like, why did you choose this study site? Well, of course you can write, why did you choose this study site? But of course, it's not clear who you're asking. It should be the speaker, but to always make this process a bit more specific, it's always good to specifically tag the person. Now, I can't tag Naveen here, so I'm just going to tag the coordinator, and you can use the @ sign, and then you type in that person's name, okay? And I can post that and I can ask that. So that's how you ask a question. We do ask that you always post within this thing called a thread, rather than just randomly sending messages on the channel. This actually will keep everything very well organized and allow the moderators and the speakers and the organizers to coordinate your questions and be able to ask them during the sessions efficiently. We also want to direct you to another channel that's very important, and it's called the lounge. You can consider it kind of like a tea break, okay? So this is where we would be virtually having tea together and where you can just talk about anything. So I asked, what do you think is the most important need to increase the number of citizen science projects in India right now? It's a very general question, but it's actually a question I'm also really interested in because it's one of the things we want to happen. So I can ask that question and then people can answer me. And if they want to answer me, let's say if you see a question here and you want to answer that in the thread, you can click on the question itself. And you can go over here, there's a little pop-up number of icons, and you can say reply in thread. The reply in thread is how you reply to that specific question. Like I said, this is the best way to communicate because it ties everything to that particular question and the responses don't get lost in the mix. When I selected my question here, you'll see this pop-up also has a number of things, and you can also add emojis. For example, if you really like a question, you can maybe add a heart. You can say, I love this question. You can add other emoticons as well. You can, for example, to a talk, you can use clapping hands, so you can respond to it. This is a great way of also reacting without actually having to type something. So you can also wave hands when you introduce people. So back over here, you can see my introductions channel. You can see that I have a hand wave already. The coordinator waved her hand at me, Akshata, and you can see that's how she did it, was by adding one of these emoticons. And I can give a thumbs up, for example. Two last things I would like to let you know about is, one, how to find out if there's anything new to see in the channels. You will see that they become bold. So any of these channels, when they're bold, that indicates that there's something new that you need to see. The other thing I want to let you know is how to directly message someone, how to DM someone. You can see how on the left it says direct messages, and there's a number of people already there. It's all of us coordinators and organizers. If you want to direct message somebody, you can either click on their name directly, like this, or you can actually search for their name in the plus sign, okay? And then you can search, say, for the coordinator, right? And then you can actually open a chat with them and send direct messages. If you're asking questions to speakers or to presenters, then it's always good to do it in the channels, but perhaps you want to have a private conversation. You want to ask somebody in particular about their project and you don't want everybody to be present in this. This is a great way to do it with a DM. Many of you may also be using this platform on mobile. So I'm also going to share my mobile screen so that you can see how to interact with it there as well. Okay, so now you can see my screen here and you can see the Slack platform, and I'm going to click on that, and it opens up to SITSI India 2021 just like it does on the web. And there's one channel that I have not joined yet. So if you want to join a channel, you can see where it says next to channel, there's a plus button, and you also see this on the web. And you can add that, and you can add all these channels. So maybe you don't see all of the channels when you join. So if you want to add a channel like help, you can add it. And you can see this is this channel you're now part of. This channel is a really great channel because if you need any help, you can ask a question here, and then our coordinators and our staff will get back to you as soon as possible. So I'm going to go actually to the posters. And you can see now, here's some posters that are already there. You can see, for example, the seasonality of spot-billed pelicans by Prashant. And if you want to interact on the mobile platform, you can see where it says one reply. You click on that one reply with your finger, and it says questions for Prashant here, and you can then type in at. So you can type it in just the same way as you would online, and you can ask it here. You can also view the videos from your mobile as well. However, there is one difference. So I'm going to navigate back. I'm going use the back button up at the top left-hand corner, back again, go back to the channel, and I'm going to go back to this original place where you have this picture. Now, on the mobile platform, it will actually take you to the YouTube platform itself where you can watch it. So just be aware of that it's taking you out of Slack. So if you want to ask a question again, you're going to have to navigate back to your Slack channel. Okay, that pretty much covers the major issues with Slack. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself, Akshata, any of our coordinators, any of our volunteers, if you have any issues during this conference. And I can't wait to interact with you. It was so much fun last year. I learned so much from all of the brilliant people that participated in the conference. I loved listening to the talks and reading the posters and interacting with all of the presenters. So I hope you do as well. Have fun, enjoy, and thank you so much for joining this conference. Bye.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Shannon, for the tutorial. And we are going to start off now with the conference. My name is Pankaj Seksaria. I have been associated for a very long time with the Environmental Action Group Kalpavriksh, and currently I teach at IIT Bombay. I'm also one of the members of the organizing committee of SITSAI, and I'm absolutely delighted today to have our first keynote speaker, who actually does not need any introduction, Professor Madhav Gadgil, who I'm guessing everybody knows. The depth and the width of his work is absolutely breathtaking, and we are extremely grateful and delighted that he has agreed to join us in this conference, and that we have him as the first keynote speaker. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to still give an introduction to him. It's never going to be possible to do justice to like I said, the breadth and the width of his work. But for many of us, maybe who are third generation after him, who's been interested in ecology and the related issues, just some kind of pointers to what he has done, and has been an inspiration, of course, and the amount of work that he's done. So Professor Gadgil was a part of graduate students at Harvard University that initiated the area of mathematical ecology and modeling in ecology and evolution. He returned many decades ago to India, pioneered the work of ecology in India, and set up the first academic center for ecological sciences at the Indian Institute of Science in the early 80s. He has been intimately concerned and involved with issues of conservation from a human and societal angle. He has interacted closely with other disciplines. So it's not just a work in ecology, but across spectrums, disciplines like social scientists, historians, anthropologists. And my first memory of actually seeing him and meeting him was almost 3 decades ago as a college student or a high school student in the Save Western Ghats March, when I had an opportunity of joining that march for a few days near Pune, where I was growing up. He initiated work on human ecology and ecological history, and he wrote this very famous book with Ram Guha, This Fissured Land and Ecological History of India. He has been involved, as we know, in policy at the highest levels, was a member of the Prime Minister's Scientific Advisory Council. He conceived and proposed the idea of the People's Biodiversity Register, which is the main theme of his talk today, and he's going to explore that with us. And as we know, more recently, he headed the Western Ghats Ecology Expert Panel. And as we all know, he continues to be very actively involved in fieldwork in the Western Ghats and continues to be an inspiration for all of us. So I would invite Professor Gadgil to start the talk. So Professor Gadgil, we are a little late from our schedule, but we have about 30 minutes for you to deliver your talk. And I will keep a tab on time. I will tell you when about 10 minutes are left and then 5 minutes. And then we'll open it up for questions. I will also run your PPT. So if you can tell me, you need to indicate to me as next, and then I'll move on to the next slide. So if you can, the mic and the screen is all yours, Professor Gadgil. Just give me a second. I'm going to put on the PPT so we can start. Yeah, just a moment now. There is. Yeah, just a moment. Is the screen visible?
Yeah.
Yes, Professor Gadgil, please.
Namaskar. Thank you, Pankaj-ji, for that flattering introduction. I'm delighted to be here and share my experiences involving citizens in generating scientific information, particularly, of course, relating to ecological environmental issues, and in formulating the People's Biodiversity Register through the Biodiversity Act of 2002 and the experiences thereafter. May I have the next slide, please? So let me start with what I learned particularly as a graduate student in ecology. It is that ecologists deal with a very complex world, very variable in space and time, and molded by manifold social economic forces. If you are a solid state chemist, then you are dealing with very well-defined systems, and you can focus on some very specific issues. You do not have to think of all sorts of other complications. But ecologists don't have that luxury, because if you want to really understand and interpret ecological situations, then you must understand the manifold social, economic, political forces which are molding the situation. You cannot simply view it in isolation. And of course, history that has molded what has gone on and what will continue to go on. Next slide, please. I also learned as a graduate student that it is very important that one must always do good science, whatever it is. Sometimes I feel that a lot of people talk of being environmentalist and doing environmental science, but very often it is not grounded, to my mind anyway, in very sound scientific discipline. Now, Charles Darwin has said that all observations must be for or against some interference. You should not go on merely accumulating facts. Mere accumulation of fact does not lead to scientific advances. And we had a very vibrant group of ecology, evolutionary biology students at Harvard when I was a graduate student there. And all of us, of course, wanted to do very good science. And the recurring theme was that we must do science, not stamp collection. As I am afraid a lot of naturalists do, is stamp collection, not science. And again, they have certain views about conservation issues grounded not in a broader perspective. This is something I would like to communicate also as we go along. The next slide, please. As soon as I got back from my Harvard days, the first subject that fascinated me was the sacred ground. So I was back in Pune, where I was born, and over the years I had seen deforestation going on in the Western Ghats all around, at least in Maharashtra. And I wanted to look at where it was preserved. I had my botany teacher, Dr. Vartak, who in Ferguson College, who was a very enthusiastic botanist, an excellent field worker, and he took me around as soon as I landed, more or less in Pune, to see the Western Ghats and to point to me a patch of primeval vegetation, and that was preserved as a sacred ground. So I suggested to him that let us launch on a joint study of whatever the sacred groves remain in the Western Ghats, and he readily agreed. And but Vartak would come with me, and he would be a wonderful companion. But all he would do is to look at the sacred grove and make a list of all the plants there. But as I said, I believed in testing hypotheses. So here was, for the first study here with him, an interesting hypothesis. I read the literature on sacred groves, and it was full of the observation that sacred groves had been set up through blind faith of people, and they survived because of that blind faith. And as the faith disappeared, sacred groves were bound to disappear. It seemed to me that people are not that unmindful of what is going on. So the alternative hypothesis I posed was that it must be because the sacred groves provide some ecosystem services to the people, and people value these ecosystem services. That is why you have these sacred groves preserved to the extent they were. Next slide, please. So the first major sacred grove that Vartak and I have visited in 71, as I said, was at a village called Mangaon. Now, there are many Mangaons. This is a very small village in Pune district, Western Ghats. And we stayed there for a couple of nights. We camped there, we talked to the people, and it was very clear that villagers had preserved this grove, appreciating its ecosystem services. They talked about how it safeguarded their streams, how it supplied leaf litter, medicinal plants, and very interestingly, refugia for hunted animals like barking deer. They were very fond. I mean, hunting is in human DNA, I believe, and people like to hunt, have always hunted, and have always consumed animals like barking deer and many others with relish. Now, they said that they are fortunate because they have this big sacred grove, which they have wisely preserved it, because that is a refugium for barking deer. They will not hunt inside the sacred grove. So barking deer, a small population is always maintained, breeds there, and they spill out. And once they spill out, they said we hunt them and enjoy their meat. So they understood this. Now you can see in this picture, this is actually from 1971, and things are probably, the sacred grove I believe is still there, and things are as they are. The rest of the landscape is devastated. Now, again, the supposition amongst the urban nature lovers is that that devastation is due to the ignorant and improvident villagers. But we tried to understand in detail what had happened historically from many sources of people's accounts, but also from accounts from Pune city. I interviewed timber merchants, and it was very clear that deforestation was due to irrigation engineers and forest department officials colluding with timber merchants and their corruption. There was no question about it. It was not the villagers who willingly had destroyed that forest. Next slide, please. Then I launched a program of research at Bandipur Tiger Reserve in Karnataka, thanks to actually Zafar Fateh Ali, Salim Ali's cousin, who was very influential. He had settled in Bangalore. He was on the Project Tiger steering committee, and he ensured that I was given permission to set up a research program. And I went to Bandipur. Interestingly enough, the forest right on the boundary of the reserve, that had been clear-felled by the forest department, but there were a number of trees standing. And what were these? I went and looked at them. They were all trees of ficus genus, various species of ficus. And they had been left because those who had been asked to clear fell the forest, the laborers did not touch the ficus trees. But again, is it just the blind faith? Interestingly enough, I started working there are many aspects of wildlife biology. Amongst them, of course, I was most fascinated by elephants. And there were 3 tame elephants used for the tourists. And the mahouts of those elephants were a source of great elephant lore. So I used to go around with them. And one day they started talking to each other. And they said, it is really a very unfortunate thing that our elephants, our tame elephants, are fond of ficus tree leaves. So we are cutting ficus tree leaves right and left all the time to feed them. But they said, these ficus trees are important for the wildlife. They are the only trees that go on fruiting all around the year. And therefore, they provide fruit source for a whole range of animals, the squirrels, the bats, the birds. And it is really improper that in this tiger reserve, we should be cutting these ficus leaves. Interestingly enough, few years later, almost 8 years later, John Terborg, professor at Princeton, published a paper on Amazonian forest where he made exactly the same point, that ficus, he called it that time, is a keystone resource genus because it provides fruit all around the year when other trees don't. So the mahouts understood exactly what Terborg was saying. Of course, Terborg was a scientist and he published in a prestigious scientific journal and it became recognized. But that knowledge was very much there with the mahouts as well. Next slide, please. My guru was Salim Ali. My father was a keen bird watcher, and well before I was born, in fact, he was a member of Bombay Natural History Society and he personally knew Salim Ali. And from my young age, I learned birds from Salim Ali's Quick Book of Indian Birds. And then because anyway, Salim Ali was my father's friend and he used to come to Pune to study bioweaver birds. I met Salim Ali and I was charmed by his knowledge, his enthusiasm, and I chose my profession as a field ecologist entirely by being inspired by him. And I maintained, of course, very good contact with him, and we went out on many, many field trips together, including the field trips to Bharatpur, this wetland. And at Bharatpur, he would go around and in the evening, he would see, we would go together for walks and he would see the buffaloes returning to the villages. And he would tell me, Madhav, once we get rid of these wretched buffaloes, then the wetland would be safe. I was wondering, I mean, he had great knowledge of birds specifically, but this was a matter of the whole ecosystem of which he had never thought of and did not work on. So why was he saying that? Anyway, he insisted on that. And he was, of course, very influential with Mrs. Indira Gandhi. And Bharatpur was declared a national park. So the buffaloes were banned really because of only sheer prejudice. And there were protests. 7 villagers were killed in the firing. And what happened next? The buffalo grazing was important to maintain Bharatpur wetland as they were as a very good bird habitat. In absence of grazing, a water-loving grass, Paspalum dicium, I think, it grew unchecked and choked the wetlands. And it became a shallow habitat only good for jasadas and a few other birds like, the purple moorhen and very few other birds. It's certainly not for all the water birds for which Salim Ali wanted to preserve them. Now, these consequences were studied by the Bombay Natural History Society team. I was in constant contact with them, and Dr. Vijayan is my good friend from Kerala. He was in charge of the program. And they knew this. All they did was to submit a report to US Fish and Wildlife Service. I asked Vijay, look, I mean, this is important scientific finding of yours. You cannot simply share it with US Fish and Wildlife Service. You must publish it in proper scientific journals so people know that the recommendation was counterproductive. But they never did that. Next slide, please. So I must say that with all due respects and my affection for Salim Ali, he was simply a classic stamp collector. He had no understanding of the functioning of Bharatpur wetland. He had no understanding of the socio-economic forces of this society. And it was sheer prejudice that he facilitated his lending blind support to, I will say very openly, the corrupt, tyrannical bureaucracy that Forest Department is. I have my whole life published a lot of evidence to that effect, and I continue to see it being enacted today also. Next slide, please. And he had no sympathy for common people. So I more and more came to the view that one must get involved with decentralized participatory monitoring to understand ecological situation. These very variable systems, variable in space, molded by history, no scientific agency centralized like Botanical Survey could collect or Zoological Survey or Forest Indian Council of Forestry Research could collect the proper adequate information. You must get people involved. So the Planning Commission had a program called Western Ghats Development Program, and I was a member of that committee, and I was a member of the Karnataka State also Planning Board. So they both asked me to examine the experience of Western Ghats Development Program in Karnataka Western Ghats and gave me a grant. And generally, one would have employed a few project assistants and carried out some kind of a survey. But I thought that this will be inappropriate. And luckily, because this was 1989, and you know, in 1986, the literacy mission had been launched by Rajiv Gandhi. So here was this opportunity to tap people involved in literacy mission. And there were a group of Karnataka Science College teachers who were very active in literacy mission. So I contacted them and we got them to monitor what was going on in terms of this Western Ghats Development Program in Karnataka. It was a very successful experience. Next slide, please. Then this is 1989. In 1992, as you know, there was Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. And the Earth Summit identified two global crises, climate change and biological diversity. And now ideas have progressed from focusing just conservation effort on tigers and elephants and rhinos to entire gamut of biodiversity. Now, objectives of the conservation of Convention on Biological Diversity signed at that time were conservation, sustainable use, and equitable sharing of benefits. The convention very specifically emphasized the importance of pertinent knowledge and traditions of local communities and their important role in the activities for follow-up of the convention. So India very quickly signed. I believe it was the 5th country to sign this CBD. And in spirit of what the CBD clearly stated, this should have been implemented through our democratic, decentralized institutions. But it was not done. It was handed over to Forest Department, which of course did not want people involved in any way. And so it's a contradiction to have people's biodiversity registers prepared by an agency which doesn't want involvement of people. Next slide, please. Anyway, in 1993, I got a grant from an American foundation called Pew Foundation, which was an interesting grant. Somebody had nominated me, and they wrote to me saying that we offer you this fairly substantial grant, and you do what you want with it, except that it must fit in with the broad framework. So I thought this is a nice opportunity to take further experience of decentralized participatory monitoring. And I was able to contact 18 different colleges and NGOs on the Western Ghats. The map on the left, left-hand side, whatever, shows you their locations, covering all the Western Ghats states except Gujarat, where I failed to have anybody involved. And together, we worked together, we developed a common methodology. We brought in the more recent scientific development, the use of remote sensing and the new discipline of landscape ecology, and also, very importantly, made sure that the studies involved recording the local community knowledge, perceptions, and aspirations of people. Next slide, please.
And Professor Gadgil, we have done 21 minutes, just to give you a hand.
Sure.
The time, yeah. We have
other than 9 minutes, I'll be done. Thanks. Go ahead. Next slide, please. So then there was an opportunity to actually develop the instrument, the proper instrument for recording what should be recorded through the as a follow-up of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And World Wildlife Fund had a program of setting conservation priorities. They wanted, of course, in the more traditional fashion, to identify localities and species for prioritizing. I said, along with that, we should also look at what people want in terms of conservation measures, which they agreed, and I was given a grant to conduct this biodiversity conservation prioritization project, looking at people's priorities, and we got very positive results. We had all over India, 52 institutions involved, covering many states of India, from Himachal Pradesh to Andaman and from Assam to Kerala. And it was clear that there were issues. People were very unhappy that they had really no role in what was going on, but where they had a role, they did something positive. I won't go into details. I have recorded many of these in the report that we prepared, and a public paper we published in ecological monographs. Anyway, next slide, please. And so with that experience under the belt and a structure for biodiversity, people's biodiversity register developed, it was possible when in 2002, the Biological Diversity Act was being formulated under Dr. Swaminathan was chairing the committee to formulate this act, and I was a member. And it was a very nice opportunity because Dr. Swaminathan was also very favorable to involving people. And so we had those rules saying that every local body shall constitute a biodiversity management committee for the purpose of, as the convention said, promoting conservation, sustainable use, and documentation of biological diversity, including biological diversity broadly, habitats, land races of crops, domesticated stocks and breeds of animals and microorganisms. And the knowledge, this should be recorded in the form of people's biodiversity registers. So these should have come on board in 2004 when the Act was put in place, began to be implemented. But Forest Department seized the whole apparatus of implementation, and of course they formulated rules which took away any genuine rule in management from BMCs, and they violated the intellectual property rights of the communities by dictating that the biodiversity register should include information on the names of the local weeds and the medicinal plant knowledge of these weeds. This was clear violation of CBD to which India was bound to stick. Next slide, please. Anyway, I'm talking now of the unmutilated original Act and what can be done with it, which we managed to try in one village in Gadchiroli district of Maharashtra, a tribal area rich in forest resources. Even today, some 70% is under forest cover. And this is what, as I said, the Act proposes. A three-tiered management structure, national, state, and local. Next slide, please. That there should be a biodiversity management committee study group of the interested members of the committee. There is really no restriction on who they should be. To help them, students and teachers from neighboring colleges, high schools, volunteers who may want to help them, and knowledgeable individuals representing different user groups. I will take one example. It is very clear, for example, that the fisher folk had tremendous knowledge both of the riverscape and of the fish species. Next slide, please. What will they look at? They will look at people, natural resources links, the landscape and waterscape, the local biodiversity elements, people's knowledge associated with biodiversity, and people's perspectives on management issues. And it will culminate in the formulation of a management plan to support the functioning of the local biodiversity management committee to undertake the functions assigned, which is conservation, sustainable use, and proper benefit sharing. Next slide, please. This is a system diagram just showing how we can visualize this. There are people, there are institutions like Gram Sabhas, institutions, there may be others. There is knowledge, there are concerns, activities, habitats and species. I won't go into trying to explain the details right now because of lack of time. But we had visualized a proper whole system, a holistic systems view, which is important for ecology. Next slide, please. So this was done in this one village, Mendalekha, almost at the center of India. Interestingly enough, it is a village. As you enter, it has a big banner saying, Delhi, Mumbai mein hamara sarkar, hamare gaon mein hum hi sarkar. We have sent our representatives to the Parliament in Delhi and Legislative Assembly in Mumbai, but in our own village, we must rule and make all the decisions. Next slide, please. So, just to show how detailed and knowledgeable people are. There is a river flowing by Mendalekha, River Kathadi, one of the last unpolluted rivers of this country. And here you can see along a stretch, I think this is about 3 kilometers, the local fishermen have names for and understanding of every little stretch of the river, of the pools, of the flow in the river, and next slide, please, of the fish. We collected along with the local people and college students, including these fisher folk, fish and got them identified properly scientifically. There were 146 fishing events and 1,508 fish caught belonging to Jadara, 24 Jadara and 32 species. Now, there is a good statistical estimator, CHO estimator, which allows you to estimate the total fish species that must be present, from which 1,500 caught fishes would give you some data. And that estimated total fish species number for Kathari here in this area is 64. And Divers had 63 different names. So essentially every species, they had a distinctive name. Gonds are not really dependent on fish that much. They only catch them for fun and to eat. They had little less knowledge. Next slide, please. And there was a very interesting fallout that during the course of the study, it was clear to the people that many fish species were on decline and some had totally disappeared. So the Grama Sabha decided of Mendalekha to ban use of all fish poisons, including herbal poisons of species such as these. And they persuaded 32 villages in their vicinity, these are so-called Ilaka villages, to also ban poisoning of the streams, which they have done and is effective since 2005. Next slide, please. Now, very recently, a farce was enacted. There was a public interest litigation before National Green Tribunal that despite this act, biodiversity management committees have not been set up, no PBRs have been done. So NGT ordered that BMC should be set up and PBRs prepared in all local bodies by early 2020. Otherwise, some fine will be imposed. And a sham began to be acted. The Forest Department slept for some time. In 2019, there was no attempt to involve the local bodies, the panchayats, in PBR preparation. They paid outside agents, some competent, but mostly experts at preparation of bogus EIAs. The country is full of bogus EIAs. Those who were preparing these bogus EIAs were paid some more to prepare these PBRs in the name of the Gram Panchayats. The Gram Panchayats, not a single Gram Panchayat was shown these PBRs, and they were put together, collected by Forest Department, these expert-generated bogus PBRs, and Forest Departments, all the state Forest Departments submitted these to the NGT, saying that we have complied, and NGT has agreed. This is a shame. Next slide, please.
And Professor Gadgil, another 2 minutes. Is that possible to wrap up for you?
Yes, absolutely.
And we have some interesting questions coming in, so we are kind of...
Yeah. 2 minutes is enough.
Thank you.
So, what next? I think citizen science, genuine citizen science involving all citizens of India, not just the educated urban component of our citizens, which is probably less than 10% of the population. But the entire citizenry, I think I have shown you enough evidence even here that they have tremendous knowledge of their local environments, their local biodiversity, and that should be finally taken on board as good citizen science, sound citizen science for a country like India. And it will flourish when we have a new democratic setup to take care of this. We have India has fortunately vibrant democracy. I'm very happy to be living in this country rather than some other country, China maybe, or even US, where people don't have this kind of freedom as we have in India in many ways. The ward Gram Sabha level citizens groups, according to 73rd and 74th constitutional amendments, are expected to prepare environmental status reports everywhere. These ward Gram Sabha level reports can be amalgamated to constitute the Panchayat, Nagarpalika, Mahanagarpalika level environment status reports. But unfortunately, our citizens are not active, and where they would like to be active in rural areas, they are not allowed to act. But this is clear space constitutionally guaranteed. So we must use this, create these set of documents. Now the Biodiversity Act provides for constitution of the management committees at the level of local bodies, leaving the choice of members, number and identity to the local citizens. Unlike Forest Department, which today insists that the local forest guard must serve as the secretary of Biodiversity Management Committee, which is, of course, a complete imposition, unjustified imposition. Next slide, please. So what should we do? There should be these people's citizens BMCs, Biodiversity Management Committees, and they should, their members, that whatever group of set of members, they should elect members at the higher levels, that is members at the district level biodiversity committees, state level biodiversity committees, authorities, and the national biodiversity authorities. And the higher level authorities should coordinate the functioning of their constituents. And such a democratically constituted National Biodiversity Authority should, of course, then serve, interact at the international level. At all levels, BMCs and biodiversity authorities should have administrators serving secretarial and other supportive function, but not exerting any authority. That is not their function. Such a setup, I believe, would nurse back our biodiversity heritage to a healthy state and would help us empower people with knowledge to create, fashion a genuine citizen science for India. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. I would, of course, welcome any number of questions. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Gadgil. That was absolutely fascinating. I think you touched up some very fascinating dimensions of history and, as always, incisive, insightful, and also very provocative. Thanks again for having accepted our request. And we have some very interesting questions come. So all people who've joined, as you probably know, the Slack channel for morning, that's where the question should come. I'm getting some questions from the organizers on the chat in Zoom, and I'm going to put out a couple of questions at least. We do have a limitation on time, so we may not be able to take all the questions, but to the extent that we can. And what we will also do is we'll put these questions together and send them to Professor Gadgil, and we'll try and see if we can figure out a way by which we can get his responses to that. So if I might go to the first question that I have from Prashant Hedao. He asks, in so many decades of your work, have you come across a situation where there is a direct conflict between what people's priorities are and what the priorities that scientists come up with? How do you resolve, harmonize these differences of opinion? And do the policies and the act also help in resolving these?
Well, the question is, how do you define scientists' priorities? As I said, scientists' priorities are not something, so well defined. It's not a homogeneous set of priorities at all. Nor are people's priorities a homogeneous set of priorities. Scientists' priorities are certainly not a homogeneous set of priorities. And yes, there would be some scientists who may have some different views from the people, As far as I can see, many disagreements are possible, but I cannot say, that scientists as a body have certain priorities very different from those of people as a body. Scientists may want to preserve elephants, and people may be getting very worried. In Kerala, I understand in 10 years, several hundred people have been trampled by elephants, and people may not want the elephants to be preserved. So, yes, you can say maybe there are those kinds of conflicts where certainly some scientists want to preserve elephants, but I am not one of them. Actually, I must tell you a little bit. You see the paintings of Bhimbedkar. This is the first Indian depiction of what was happening about 10,000 to 5,000 years ago, in Madhya Pradesh, and those show hunting of elephants right and left, and it continued to this day. If you go to the Munnar, which in Kerala, that was a place where the tea planters ruled actually, and they have their fashionable club. And you
actually deepen the democratic participation from token participation to deeper empowerment. So he's written about participation, JFM, eco-development, BFCs, EDCs, and all that. But these all seem very token. So the question is more like, what can we do and what do you think needs to be done to make that empowerment and participation true and substantial?
Look, as I said, our democracy fortunately remains very alive. And if you would look at, there are all these acts. For example, even just the 73rd, 74th amendments to the Constitution, they are providing a lot of role to the local communities. And Kerala had, albeit very short-lived, an experiment in 1995-96 called People's Planning Program, in which every panchayat in the state had prepared their own plans based on survey of the resources, survey of the human resources, natural resources, and suggested what should be done. And so that kind of program is possible under our constitution. Actually, I feel the other day, I think Parliament passed a resolution about some reservation to some caste business. I didn't follow to in great depth. What they should do is, they should unanimously pass a resolution deepening the bodies of powers of the local bodies and really bring in democracy in this country. I hope they will do so one of these days. In any case, even in absence of that, there are a lot of opportunities. And that is what I think. I mean, JFM and all is very specific and very limited. This is the Constitution of India, and it declares that people are the sovereign rulers of India, and we have to actually articulate and bring it into play.
Right. Thank you. So on that note, there are a whole set of other questions, but time is always a constraint. And we even have a suggestion that for some of these talks, maybe we should give a larger time window, and maybe we'll do that in the future. But thank you so much, Professor Gadgil. Absolutely fascinating, like I said, insightful and provocative. And what we will try and do is gather these questions and get them to you. And then we'll try and see if we can separately also at least respond directly to those individuals who have asked those questions.
By email, I can try. So.
Yes, I know. It's we'll also try and see if we can make that happen. We won't promise it to our participants, but we'll certainly try and do that. And thank you so much, sir. And if you would, and if it's possible, please do continue and at least attend some of these if it's possible for you. But in any case,
I will try. I will try.
Right,
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Namaskar.
So thanks to everyone. We wrap up this first keynote by Professor Gadgil. We take a couple of minutes break, and we will move on now to the next session. And as it's probably clear, we have there's a different Slack channel for that one. So if you go there and log in, we will start shortly on that one. Thank you everybody for joining, and look forward to continuing with this. Thank you and bye-bye.